새로운 시작은 늘 설레게 하지 모든 걸 이겨낼 것처럼
No, I'm not going to be singing, but I can't wait for you to see the next episode with Chris. Stay tuned. Welcome to episode 12 of Sharing Developer Stories hosted by Tech Rally. Today I talked to Chris Lyon, an actor from the Korean drama series Itaewon class, who is now a software developer. I'm super excited to share this episode. We go over his software developer journey and how entertainment and tech blend together. Stay tuned. Hey everyone, welcome to Sharing Developer Stories hosted by Tech Rally. Today's guest is a special guest. I never imagined this scenario where I would have a chance to talk to him, but hey, crazy things work out when you work in tech. He is an actor, and you might recognize him from the Korean drama Itaewon class, now embarking life as a software engineer. Without further ado, here's Chris Lyon. Hey Chris, how are you doing?
Wow, thanks, man. That was a really humbling intro. Thanks.
Hey. I like to practice here and there, take one, take two, take three. But for those of us that might be living under a rock or just not into K drama, can you give us a little intro about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Chris Lyon, like you mentioned. I'm from originally like the Northeast area, was in Connecticut, moved down to Florida, and then ended up going out over to Korea. And I was living in Seoul for a couple years and ended up getting first was doing like music production, and that evolved into different areas of the entertainment industry. And now I'm working as a software engineer as well.
Nice, nice. Were you always in the kind of that music and acting field before even Korea?
Yeah, bro. Like before I had okay, so like the funny thing is like when I was in college for like the first year that I was in college, I was like, okay, yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to get into IT. That was the thing that I had in my mind. Only because like I loved playing video games on the computer, and I just thought, hey, computers, video games is perfect. IT.
Right.
I hated the classes though. And I ended up not pursuing it, and thought like I clearly am not into anything related to like actual, you know, whether it be like systems engineering or programming. I just thought that wasn't for me. But when I was in high school, I had some friends who were Korean, and they introduced just Korean culture to me and like the language and stuff, and that's how I kind of got interested in Korean specifically.
But how did you get into acting then if you were doing IT stuff and all of that jazz?
Bro, I didn't even I was never thinking of doing like anything outside of music production, because like when I grew up, I
Mhm.
was learning just like music theory and stuff like that, playing different instruments. And so when I got into high school, like making beats was cool. So
Mhm.
I was like, hey, this is what I want to do. I had an older cousin who was making beats, and I saw him using FL Studio one day. It's like a music production program, and I was like, that's something I want to do. So I just ended up doing that in high school. And so when I later went over to Korea, because my friends kind of like pulled me into the culture um and recommended I go over there. Once I got over there, I was like, hey, let me see who I can meet, like just in the entertainment industry, because I knew like K-pop's a thing,
Mhm.
So let me see who I can meet. Let me see what kind of network relationships I can make. And so I just sent out like 50 to 100 emails to random people in the industry, which
Wow.
is probably really annoying in retrospect. But I was just like, hey, I'm a student. I want to, kind of just see how the entertainment industry works. I would love to, if you have time, sit down, have some coffee, ask a couple questions. I'd be honored. And like, no one replied except for like two people. And one person, his name was Kay. He was running like a hip hop site they were doing like events and different stuff like that as well. And he answered and was like, "Yeah, I'll grab coffee with you." And he was gracious enough to like sit down, answer questions, and after the meeting, he was going to another meeting with a rapper. His name was Double K, and that kind of like snowballed everything.
Yeah, I think a lot of software developers can relate in some ways where everyone says you need to apply to 100 job applications or 200 job applications, and it may be a little bit harder to get a recall for in your case, but it's really cool that you kind of put in a little bit of the hustle when you got to Korea to say like, hey, I'm not just gonna sit still and see what happens. You were a lot more proactive about it.
Yeah, yeah. I was getting really discouraged after like the 40th email. I was just like, this doesn't seem like it's working.
And I mean, just to rewind a little bit, I think a lot of people they love games when they're growing up, and then they associate that
Yeah,
to
man.
IT. But I don't think IT is actually really that close to what we do as software developers, because IT you learn about the internet and the systems, but as coders we
Yeah,
like build products, So it's kind of funny how like I'm sure like we're pretty similar age, and we grew up in the with the idea that IT just encompassed coding and everything like that, but it's actually isn't
right.
at all. So it's so funny.
Yeah. So
But
I think they had like one or two programming classes, and I just didn't even really.
yeah.
I took like one, one like 1 day of
Mhm.
the programming class, and I was just like, this doesn't seem fun.
Yeah, it's
I don't
kind
know.
of
I just didn't
funny
like the
how
class, I guess.
it's kind of funny how people start love to code after a certain age, but like when you grow up, like I don't know, I hated coding too. It was like my least favorite subject. So
Wait, so
it's
like, what was your first time that you got like introduced to coding? Then, like, what
I
was
would say
that like?
I would say it was in college. But the funny thing was we were using it for like MATLAB, and we were using it for like moving like these little like motors and whatever whatnot. But I was in a
Oh, like
group
robots?
class. Yeah, moving robots from because I did mechanical engineering, so we had to do a little bit
Oh,
of
that's
coding.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
So,
I
like,
was
what were
in a
you working with?
team.
Like Arduino or like what was
Dude,
that?
I don't even remember. It was something similar to that, and I was in a team of four, and I literally was the one that never coded. I was doing like the AutoCAD and the 3D cutting and all of that stuff because I was like, I'm never
Oh,
gonna
that's
be a software
cool.
engineer, or like I'm never gonna need to use this. And funny enough, now I like use it every day. So
Every day.
every day, man, it's
Look
crazy
at
how things work
that.
out. Yeah.
So
But
wait, so when I'm curious though, like I'm sorry, like I know
no,
you're
no, go ahead. Yeah,
but I'm
this is
like
how we
really
do it.
curious. So like when you were doing stuff with like 3D cutting and stuff like that, what kind of like what does that look like? Like I always was curious about stuff like that.
Yeah, we used a few programs called SolidWorks or AutoCAD, and I'm sure there's some people that
Okay.
still do use it, but
Yeah.
basically you create the 3D modeling that way, and then you could transfer that file over to like a laser printer, and then we would cut pieces of acrylic and with the way that we shaped using those like software programs, and then
Okay.
after that I mean it does it like with very fine precision, so if you create the holes necessary for your like screw to fit in, and so that we would have like a shop afterwards where you get the acrylic and then you
Bro,
have
that's
to like
wild.
yeah manually do a bunch of stuff, but that was what I
So
personally
you
enjoyed
would like
more. Yeah.
yeah. So you would like take your designs like that you would do in SolidWorks
Hmm.
or AutoCAD, and then you would take it to the shop, or like did you have like a little like
Yeah, so our school had like a little shop.
machine?
Yeah, our school had a
Got it.
little
Okay.
shop, and then we would have to wear our safety glasses and do all of that. So I actually found a lot of enjoyment
Man,
doing that, like getting my like hands dirty, but the
that's
coding
real
part was
engineering stuff.
was really tough actually, so I never had to touch that part. That's the benefits of a team, right? You have people doing one thing and then the other one's doing the other. But
Oh man, that's cool.
yeah, man. So that was, I mean, it was fun, but I mean, you learn a lot of things, and then you realize what you like and you don't like, and sometimes those things do change. But anyways,
Yeah.
back to you, sir. Why did you
I
want to
like
go to
derailed the
Korea?
entire
So
conversation.
I know is this the Tech Rally show or is this the, the Chris show? But I'm just curious, like of all places, why Korea? Like I know you said you had some friends there, but like
Oh,
how did they convince you?
like so they convinced me, but it was more like I didn't know that they were like trying to convince me. So like we were, it was like a boarding school, and I
Okay.
had some friends who were staying in like some of the dorm rooms that were near me, and so sometimes I would like go to their rooms, and there were like a lot of Korean students. So I
Mhm.
got really close with a couple friends, and I started learning the language. And one of the friends, he was like, "Yeah, bro, like you should like go to the school that I came from and like go teach English there." And I was just like, I guess like that would be fun one day.
Mhm.
Little did I know he actually calls up the principal at his school and was like, "Hey, there's this student who wants to go and teach English." I never said that, but I mean, he just went ahead and called him. I mean, I said yes, but like I didn't say like, "Hey, bro, can you call your
Right.
principal?"
Right.
Yeah. Later, I get this phone call from the principal at my school, and he was like, "Chris, can you come to the office? I gotta talk to you about something." And I was like, "Bro, what did I do?" So like the whole walk there, I'm just like, "Bro, what did I do?" I'm just go in there and I get there and sit down. He closes the door and he's like, "All right, I got something to talk to you about." And he was like, "So I hear that you wanted to go. I get this phone call that you wanted to go and teach English at the school over in Korea." And I was just like, "That's what this is about." So that's kind of how I ended up going after I graduated.
How much
For
Korean did you actually know before you got to Korea?
Well, I knew how to say like hello, my name is Chris. I'm hungry. I like snacks. I used to make like these raps to help me learn vocabulary words in Korean, and like one of them that I made was just about like yeah, I go to the cafe, I go to school, I like snacks. You don't like that? Don't say that. Like it was just it was nonsense. It was like really stupid
Wait, that was all in
rap.
Korean? You would do it all in Korean that way?
Yeah, because like I would just take words that I know and just like yeah, make a song about it to help me remember.
Honestly, that might be the best way to learn a different language if you think about
I mean, it worked, but my friends hated me for it. So
it. That's so funny that you mentioned being like an English teacher. I mean, I'm Korean myself, so I know that the trend, or when I talk to my friends that live in Korea, they say a lot of people that come from the States either, or wait, not from the States, but oh, maybe yeah, from the States. They're
yeah,
either they're here to teach English or they're from the army. So like the
that's that's kind of on point. So you're not wrong there.
yeah, for
Yep.
sure. So let me just kind of rewind and figure out your life story from the beginning, kind of. So you went to boarding
Yeah.
school, you had a lot of Korean friends, they somehow duped you into going to Korea to teach
Duped
English.
me.
But at that same
Yeah.
time, while you're teaching English, you reached out to a bunch of, I guess, would you say music producers? Like, what do you call them? Agents or?
Yeah, so like I was sending emails to like anybody who was like even vaguely
Mhm.
associated with the entertainment industry,
Right.
specifically like music.
Uh huh.
So it would be like random hip hop sites. It would be other producers. It would be artists. It would be like artist management companies, and nobody was answering except for this guy and
Right.
one other guy who was a rapper. His name was like Analog Hunyan or like Analog Boy.
Right.
He sat down with me and like answered questions too. Super grateful for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I never got a chance to talk to him after that, but
Awesome, awesome. And then
yeah.
so you eventually, I guess you started in Korea with in the music industry for a bit, and then how did you end up acting for a show called Itaewon Class?
Yeah, man, that was a surprise because I started working at this studio,
Mhm.
like a music studio, and we had like different producers that would come in and work with us. And one of the producers there, he was like, "Hey, I have a friend who he's like a director friend who wants a black guy who can play guitar." And I was just like, "Okay, I'm black. I play guitar.
Mhm.
I was like, cool. So I go to the meeting, and I sit down with them, and they're like, "Oh, great, you're here. Um, here's your lines." I just thought it was like, at this point though, I thought it was like a music video or like,
Right.
I don't know, I don't know, commercial. I don't know. Like I didn't think it was like something with lines. I didn't
Like
think
a
it was like
script
an
reading.
acting role. Yeah. So they're like, "Hey, here's your lines. You have 30 minutes. We'll come back in just a second, and you can audition." And I was just like, "Wait, I didn't. I think I don't know what happened here, but I'm not an actor." But I was just like, let me just try. So I studied for like 30 minutes. They apparently didn't hate my audition, so I got the role, and it was a short film. It was called Live Hard, and later it turned into like a feature length film. And that kind of started my short acting career. Um,
Awesome. That's awesome. Oh my
yeah.
gosh. Who would have, it's so funny how sometimes you could try to like plan out your life so thoroughly and just making sure I need to do this to get to here, I need to
All
do this here, but
right.
it's so random. It could just randomly happen where you're just like, here are a bunch of lines, figure it out, and then you start something there. That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
Dude,
Yeah.
I'm sure
That
a lot of
was pretty crazy.
that was probably crazy. But in terms of what, like, I used to go to Korea almost like every year, and every year I do go to Korea, I would always go to Itaewon. How would you describe the city of Itaewon?
So Itaewon is wild. So like, okay, so you said you went to Itaewon, right?
Itaewon all the time. I would have to go there. Every time I go to Korea, I would always have to go to the city of Itaewon.
Yeah. So Itaewon is pretty cool because it feels like, and I'm sure you know this. Like, it feels like this mesh in between Korea and like a bunch of
Everything
different
else.
countries. Yeah. Like
Everything
it's
else.
more. It sometimes it feels like more of like a melting pot than the U.S.
Mhm.
Like so, I loved it because like they have like all kinds of different foods, restaurants, and like cafes, like little game rooms and like pubs, like different, all kind of different stuff there. So like it's really like this very rich cultural experience that I've never seen in the U.S.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I lived in Austin for about 3 years, so I really missed Tex-Mex food whenever I was in Korea. And then they always have some nice. It has everything like from the different states, not even just U.S., but it just has like all different types of culture, like you're alluding to. Whether it's like Europe, it has some European, like British vibes as well. And it's, yeah, to your point,
Yeah,
it's a
man.
great place to be. And I feel like a lot of my old coworkers back at Samsung, when I was living in Korea for 3 months, they really enjoyed going there because sometimes if you go outside of Itaewon and you don't know the language, it's just very difficult to navigate
It's like
around.
a totally different world. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's kind of what I wanted to allude to, the show Itaewon Class. My girlfriend and I, we really enjoyed watching it, and I remember seeing you, which was even crazier because
Oh
I think
man.
in that show you don't speak English, right? You just only speak Korean in that
Yeah.
show, which is crazy
So the
and
character like
amazing.
can't speak any English at all.
That's such a great concept. I love it. But
Yeah.
if you met someone that didn't watch it, how would you describe the show, and what problems do you think the show addresses?
Oh man. How would I describe it for someone who just never seen it? Hmm.
Like, how would you tell me, "Hey, you should watch this. This is really good. I'm in it." What would you tell me?
I'm in it, so that totally doesn't sound conceited at all. Hey, there's a show. I don't know. I'm in it. I don't know if you know.
So it's pretty good.
I feel like now anything that like any way that I introduce the show is just gonna sound terrible. Okay, so it's but the really cool thing about the show is like I loved how the show it's not the stereotypical like Korean drama because they talk about so many different um social issues in the show.
Yeah.
So like the character I played was Tony. He's a black Korean. And they also have uh they cover like issues of like the transgender community and just like social, like the social structures that like a lot of us have to deal with in life. So like it's really like an interesting story outside of just the traditional like Korean love story drama, which are, they're cool, but like
Right.
there's like another level, there's another layer to it that I really enjoyed.
Right. And what I really enjoyed about that show specifically, it didn't feel like every part of the scene was forcing something or to address these issues. It was just very subtle in the way things were happening, which I really liked. And you just kind of get like a hint of it, and then they keep moving on to the story, and you're like, oh
Right,
wait,
which
that's really cool.
yeah.
I didn't
So
notice
it doesn't
that.
feel like they're like shoving it down your throat or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like some like propaganda style show of like, hey, like this is this, but it really is cool to see shows like that. And I kind of wish there was more of that, especially because in Korea, I think there's still like some catching up to do in from that perspective of like addressing all of those issues. But I'm glad that something like Itaewon Class could be entertaining, but at the same time, like kind of shed some light on those kind of things.
Yeah, yeah. Like and that's something that like we all like everywhere you go, like those kind of
Mhm.
problems exist. So like it's cool to see it like in like all kinds of different from all kinds of different perspectives and like in different contexts, like cultural
Yeah,
contexts.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, we're 20 minutes in and we haven't even talked about coding yet. So this is a coding and
Yeah.
tech channel. So I have to ask you, big name actor, you could do totally whatever you wanted after the show. Why did you choose software development?
Okay, yeah.
Let's
So,
get to it.
I think you kind of like overhyped the possibilities after the show, but one of the things that I was doing like right before the show, and like even while we started like shooting the show, towards the beginning, we were doing something with Hanwha, which is like a electronics tech. It's a tech company out in Korea, and one of the things that we were doing there was working with CGI and projection mapping and doing like new media stuff. And I was um, heading like a small, very small team of like new media artists, and I was doing stuff with CGI. And one of the things that I started to realize was like in order to meet a lot of these deadlines, we had to speed up our workflows a lot. And with some of these programs, we have the option of scripting. And so that was kind of like the first time that I got introduced to programming in a way that I kind of thought was useful. Because before, when I was taking it in college, I was just like, I didn't see how the stuff that I was learning could actually be applied to solving real problems. So seeing like scripting be an option for how those could be, some of those concepts could be like really used in a practical way was exciting, and it intrigued me and made me think like, okay, maybe this is something that I actually might enjoy. And the
Hmm,
more I did it on the job, the more I started thinking like, yeah, I really think I want to pursue this.
right. And by the way,
Yeah.
I watched Korean baseball for 1 year, and so the Hanwha Eagles are the worst team ever. But but I do like the underdog teams.
Hey, you gotta root for the underdogs
You
because
gotta
you know
remember
one day, the day is gonna come, and it's gonna feel sweeter than any other team that you could have possibly rooted for. So,
exactly, exactly. But I have to ask, like, I think saying describing that story, I like the story, and you got hooked on it, but at the same time, how did you know that you wanted to actually do something like this? Because if I didn't know any coding and then I noticed that, oh, this thing could be automated, I think the first thing I would be like, oh, can someone automate this? Or did someone just say, hey, like sit down with me, let me show you something cool,
oh,
and you're
okay.
like, oh crap, this is cool, like I want to do this too.
But I wish I had someone like that. But there was a guy who he was like super talented, and he actually interviewed with us for he was doing he was doing like a lot of new media stuff, but he was programming in Unity and C#.
Mhm.
And the stuff he was doing was really cool. It's just like it didn't really fit our artistic direction. But seeing him use it for like creating art and stuff made me kind of change how I viewed coding. And I
Hmm.
had already started kind of like just seeing people online post scripts of like, hey, instead of having this default setup when I open up Blender, which was the program I was using, um, I can, with this script, I can have, this be my default setup, or, I can, when I click this button, and I can create 5 cubes in a row or something like that.
Right.
And then I would just like copy that and paste it, and I was like, whoa, it works.
Yeah.
And then I would like see that little variable of 5 cubes, and I would be like, what if I change this to 8 or something? And I would hit run, and I was like, whoa, it works. And so that kind of like got me my interest peaked in how just like coding worked in general.
Right, right. And kudos to whoever let you touch that kind of stuff when you had no idea what you're doing.
I
But
mean, granted, I
gotta start
started.
somewhere.
Yeah, I started with just like on my own personal projects, and I
I
was like,
see, I
oh,
see.
let me try. Yeah, because
So
like I was the
were you able to like contribute through code at that Hanwha position, or did you kind of have to do that somewhere else?
Yeah, so that was the cool thing. And kind of helped me in getting my first job. Was I was able to use that as some experience of like coding on the job, because we had a couple of different teams, but I was heading our small team of like CGI and new media artists. And so I had the flexibility to try out some things in production, which were probably not really stable, but just trying some stuff, creating like some very small like add-ons that like I would never share with anyone because it was like super niche the case that we were
Mhm.
using it for. But having that opportunity to kind of work on those small like not personal but small projects that were related to coding, and have it actually help us to create some quicker workflows was really cool. And then I was able to put that on my resume and talk about that in my interviews.
Right,
So that was
right.
great.
So, dude, that's amazing. I mean, I think a lot of people, at least for me, I kind of discovered coding again through more like the HTML. Like maybe I had a Zanga or something that I modified a little bit, forgot about coding later, and then
Wait, Sango, what's that?
say, okay, I'm gonna sound too old. Like maybe like MySpace.
Okay, so it's like MySpace though.
No, Zynga was like was like Medium before Medium existed. It was like a blog website. Oh man,
Oh,
Chris, you're making
okay.
me feel very old right now.
No.
So let's just move on from what I just said. But essentially, I learned HTML a long time ago, and see, not really even CSS. It was probably like inline styling. But in your case, it sounds like you were able to do a bunch of cool scripts, which is pretty crazy to me because if I saw that too, I would have been like, "Oh man, this is awesome." But it's just it's weird because I think one is more visual and the other one's like, "Wow, you get to really see the cool output." And either way, it's really cool to see like how people get piqued by coding.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
I don't know, like this is one of my pet peeves was like I really thought like I vehemently hated coding. Like I really thought I just hated it. And now that I think
me too.
about like how I was actually able to take something that I was already interested in and see how it was used in that field, I think that it could be so much more powerful as of an introduction with like education in general if we kind of approach education as like, hey, look at all the cute cool ways these things are being used. um
Yeah.
like CGI got me interested in math again. Like I thought I hated math. I mean, I liked the simple math, but like not like anything past algebra. I was just like, nah, I hate this.
Yeah.
And like seeing it being used to create like something like within entertainment, a lot of people are interested in entertainment, but like if we are able to use things like entertainment, or just I think we need to rethink how we're marketing education. It's just it's a pet peeve I have.
No, I think you make up a really good point, and I feel like my brain has definitely shifted, or just my view of how I approach anything in general. Because when you're a software developer and you're coding, you kind of I feel like you operate in a different way where like I can solve this, or I could always solve this and
Right?
figure something out, and then you
Yeah.
start thinking about problems, just generic problems, and you're like, how can I use the skills that I have to actually solve this problem? And I actually want this was going to be one of my questions, and I'll
Yeah.
save you the embarrassment. We're not going to watch the clip of you
Oh
singing, but I saw you
no.
singing, and you're amazing, man. I had to actually do a double take, and I was like, "Are
Thanks.
you singing, or is the other person singing? Are you both singing?" I was like, "Oh my goodness, you guys are both singing." But I was gonna ask, I see a lot of intersection between music and tech, and I think you're a perfect example of it. Like, what are your opinions about that
About, I'm sorry, it's what in tech?
intersection between music and tech?
Oh, music in tech. Yeah. So I'm seeing it a lot more now.
Hmm.
Like when I was using FL Studio, they had like very basic expressions that you could use with um, within like music production. And now it's starting to blossom more into like they use Python, I think, as like their official scripting language.
Oh, that's so cool.
Um, yeah, and like there are really cool things we can do with like programming MIDI controllers, and MIDI controllers that can control, like it can be a keyboard that you're playing on, or it could be like they use MIDI controllers for lights in like live performances on stages, and they oftentimes will program in these things, and programming can be used there as well. Like it's just really cool to see how the entertainment world, and I know you just talked about music, but like just entertainment in general, I think with how prevalent and widely appreciated entertainment is, I feel like this is the perfect marketing strategy to reach a bunch of young kids who are
Yeah,
already interested in it anyway,
you're right.
instead of saying like, okay, now we're going to learn algebra, or now we're going to, here's a coding class. Like if I want to like go and build a fence, I'm not going to like take a class on how to build a fence.
Right.
I'm going to like start with, okay, why do I even want a fence?
Hmm.
First of all, and then I'm going to start looking at like some nice fences that I like.
Right.
And once I find something that I like, then I'm going to try to figure out how do I make that, and I just feel like it's kind of like backwards how we're approaching a lot of like how getting people into tech.
Right. I think what you're alluding to is that a lot of, at least in the classroom settings, and I don't know about the education system now because it's been a while, but in general, we're getting taught information, but we don't know why we're getting taught it or what we can
Why?
actually
Yeah.
accomplish with it. And that's actually a big issue because, yeah, you say you're not good at math, but maybe you are actually good at it. You just were never interested in applying what you learned to what's possible with it, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's actually a really good point. And that's something that I did a coding bootcamp school, and I think the major appeal of why I wanted to learn how to code and maybe why I went to coding bootcamp school was I I learned through research that hey, if you learn these skills, you can build sites like this. You can build sites like Facebook, or well, maybe not Facebook, but you could just build any type of application that you want, but
Yeah.
you have to know these skills. But before it was like, okay, why do I need to know a for loop, or why do I need to know
Right.
while loop? It's just the
And
context is
otherwise,
so
it's
off.
just like, well, if I want to get a job, I
Yeah.
need to, but like, why?
Yeah. So that's actually a really good point. And I think maybe in general, we need to be more, at least the new generation, we got to somehow get them more excited about why coding could be so valuable, not just from a pure technical skill perspective, but on what you can potentially accomplish.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
starting to learn, like, even when, like, on the job, as I'm a new programmer, like, I'm
Mhm.
starting to realize, like, understanding why, like, a senior engineer is telling me, like, hey, this is what we need to do. If I don't understand why we're doing it, I'm inevitably going to have to eventually, like, they just can't give me A to Z instructions.
Mhm.
So one of the instructions, I'm going to run into a problem that no one foresaw, and I'm going to have to try to, work around this problem. And if I don't know why we are doing it in the first place, whatever solution I come up with is not gonna match the
Right.
the actual problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I mean, I would say like even with any feature that you're building, don't just look at the code. You have to understand why you're building what you're building. Otherwise,
Right.
it's gonna feel mindless. So I have a quick question for you. So you went from doing a lot of scripting, and I think you're doing more web development now. How did you make that transition?
Yeah. So it wasn't really like super structured. It was
Mhm.
more like, okay, I like coding now. And then I first started looking at, okay, I noticed that there are like a lot of, I already was aware that like, CGI studios would hire um, like artists that knew how to code. But I just thought like, oh, all of them came from a programming background, and then decided, hey, I want to be like a CGI artist now.
Right.
Um, but and so I started looking into that, and I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. But I just started to get. I enjoyed working. It's just that when you are working in the entertainment industry, you have a lot of clients who might be a pleasure to work with, but ultimately it's a lot of guessing of like, what do they even want? And sometimes as a
Mm.
client, they don't even know. And that's fine. Like, this is part of the job. It's just that like, there's a lot of that, like, it's not very like cut and dry. And so, like, for example, like with music or with art, they might tell you like, oh, they like something that is exciting, or like it's very calm vibe. It's like very
Put more
subjective words.
pop in
Yeah,
it or something.
yeah, like
Doesn't have
it's
that
like very
pizzazz.
subjective. Yeah, like what
Pizzazz.
what does that mean? But like a lot of times it would be like really subjective words,
Mhm.
and then you spend a lot of time doing the work, and you're having to come up with like 10 solutions because they don't, they don't know what they want,
Right.
which is fine. Like that, it's not their fault. That's what I would do. But, that's why they're coming to like a studio to get the work done. But
Right.
like, I started to get kind of like, I started wondering like, do I want to work in this as like a career, continue with this as a career, or do I want to just kind of like do this in my downtime, and then I can choose what kind of projects I want to work on?
Hmm.
And then I started looking into other options, and I started out with Python because Blender uses Python, but um, I started trying to do like stuff with like, I can't remember the name of it, but like the Matt. It's like some graphical thing that I can't remember
MATLAB?
what I was. Yes, I think that's what it is. And you said you were using it too, right?
Yeah, we were using it. I was using it too in my school. Yeah.
Yeah, so I started with that, and then I decided like, I want. There was always this this thing that I wanted to make, where like I started to get tired of having to switch back and forth between like all the courses I was watching on YouTube, and trying to follow along and learn stuff in Python, and like I just hated having to like grab my mouse and like switch to the other window, or like Alt Tab and then
Mhm.
rewind and try to like catch up. Like, it was just like frustrating. So I was like, I want to make something where I could just like hit a button while I'm working in my code editor and be able to like rewind or like pause, fast forward, or whatever I need to do, and never like have to like leave the code editor. And so I tried to do it with Python, and it just was not. It was not working. I was trying like all the wrong tools. Like, I tried like Selenium. I thought like, oh, that's something on the internet. That must be able to do it. That's not a
Oh no.
good tool for that. Yeah, I tried AutoHotkey and it was working. But like eventually someone said, when I was asking questions about like, what programming languages should I use, someone said you might have to use something with JavaScript to be able to do
Right.
something like that. And I was like, oh, now I have to finally learn this HTML and CSS and JavaScript that everybody's talking about. So, but I learned a lot, and while making that app that I was making, finally finished it, and then I was like, huh, I kind of like JavaScript. I used
Mm,
to think I looked at all the brackets before, and I was like, that looks so ugly, and then I started to to really like it. And that's kind of how I thought, okay, I can see an actual career path, a way to get into the industry with web development, and that's how I ended up choosing to go that route.
awesome. That's amazing. And were you using Visual Studio Code for your editor, or what were you using?
Yeah, so like it's it works within the editor. It works technically it works just wherever you are. Like you can be in like a video game or whatever. So like it's
Right.
not that like I built a Visual Studio extension or something. It was like a Chrome extension, so it
Oh,
runs
it's a
on
Chrome
Chromium.
that's so
Yeah,
cool, man. I mean, to do that at such an early point in your career, like I think we would just
bro,
be
I
happy if
had
we
no
created a
idea.
simple form where you just wrote like first name, last name. And I'm like, yo, I did it. I did it, code. Hire me. So I would say
Bro,
no, that's
I had
really
no
cool.
idea what I was doing. And like looking at the code now, it's just like there are so many like nested for loops. It's just so ugly.
Hey, whatever gets the job done. I would like to say that, at least when you're first starting off, uh, you gotta just make it work and then make it right
Yeah.
and then make it fast. So like the first if you don't get the first step, then you definitely can't get to the second. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So did you ever deal with imposter syndrome or anything like that? It seems like you're just pretty chill about, hey, it doesn't work. I'm just gonna move on to Selenium. And it's like, oh, Selenium doesn't work. I'll just do JavaScript.
Bro, all the time. Yeah, like the entire time. Like everybody was telling me like I would ask like I would go on like forums online because that's how I learned like stuff with like CGI and stuff like Blender and
Mhm.
Houdini. Like I would always just go up online and ask, questions on Discord and Facebook groups and stuff like that. And so that's what I did for, trying to learn how to build my app. And everyone's telling me like, I don't think that's gonna work, bro. Like, yeah. Especially because I was like asking in Python groups, and they were like, I don't think that's even possible. Like, what do you like?
Mm.
How are you gonna do that?
Like you need to hit Dom or something. You're like,
Yeah, like it doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
that's so funny. I
But
mean, I'm glad that you know what I think. What I am very encouraged by your actual software developer journey is that you're always curious and you're willing to ask the questions and not be afraid to just be told that, hey, this isn't gonna work, so try it this way. And you don't go like, no, I need to do it this way. I need to use Python or
see,
whatever.
it sounds like that, but I was trying Selenium for a good while. So
Oh man. So but I have a quick, like, I guess it's not a personal question, but just a mindset question. For me, if I found success at something, and for you, I know you do music, you did a bit of acting, and now you're kind of coding. Sometimes I feel like if I was in your shoes, I would consider coding more as like a hobby and maybe something I share on Twitter and say, hey guys, I learned how to build this really quickly. But now it seems like you're making this a career. Like, was it a hard decision, and what was your approach like, especially when you have that love for music and whatnot?
yeah, like, bro, I'm kind of curious about like what kind of, cause like everybody has their hobbies, and like
Mhm.
I don't know, talking to you, you seem like you're interested in a lot of different stuff. So I'm
Mm,
kind of like interested in hearing that as well. But like for me, I I was always thinking like I liked it, and originally I was just like maybe I could just do this for fun, or like I
mm,
can. Originally the goal was to like learn how to do cool stuff in Blender and Houdini. That was like, yeah, so that was my goal,
right.
and it kind of transitioned over the time into like, oh, I can do other stuff. And originally the YouTube like Chrome extension, it was like, okay, let me make this thing so that I can learn stuff in Python and also follow along tutorials in like Houdini and Blender and not have to like alt tab all the
Mm,
time.
just trying
And
to solve
so,
a problem that you're having every single minute, every single
right,
day.
yeah. So yeah, that's what it started with, and that was the goal. And then like as I started to work more and more, I just like I was talking about with the clients, I started thinking, is this really what I want to do?
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, but maybe eventually when you get to that skill point of whether it's through scripting or through web development, maybe you could find that nice blend of having both of your interests merged together. You could build like a really cool app. Who knows, in 2022, 2021, who knows?
That's a tight time frame that you mentioned there, but okay.
2023. We'll give it a few
Yeah,
years.
one day.
Yeah,
That sounds like a lot of fun. Like, okay, but like for you though, like, do you? Because you originally were like getting into like I don't know. I was looking at like SolidWorks and AutoCAD as like another thing that I was also interested in,
Mm,
especially because like our company we were doing. I was in charge of like the new media and CGI stuff, but like we were doing um a lot of like interior renovations with Hanwha. We were like actually building stuff, and so I was on our team. We needed more like people that could do AutoCAD and stuff like that. So I was
right.
like oh, like in 3D, like maybe it'll work. But like, how did like what made you think, okay, this all this cool stuff with SolidWorks and AutoCAD, maybe I want to do programming instead?
Right. I think for me, well, I guess just the backstory is that I did do those things in college, but unfortunately, when I started working at Samsung, it was in the more like semiconductor industry, so and like more manufacturing industry.
Oh yeah.
So the problem there was I lost a lot of the engineering knowledge that I learned in college, and I learned how to do everything kind of like the Samsung way. And doing that for 3 years straight, you kind of lose those skills to make it applicable to other jobs. Like if I wanted to work at Boeing or do like aeronautics, I didn't really have any like relevant experience. And
Oh,
that became
okay,
a certain problem for me where I was kind of stuck. And I even considered doing law school. So I took the LSATs, and I realized that
bro.
I'm gonna have to read a lot, and I don't actually like reading, so nor do I really like writing that much either. So that was
Yeah.
kind of punted. And then I was thinking about doing grad school in mechanical engineering again, but I don't know. I just felt like it wasn't really. I mean, obviously, I couldn't find the job the first time. Like, what are the chances I'll find the second one? And then I just stumbled upon a coding tutorial on YouTube, and shout out to the new Boston. That was when he was like the Traversy Media before Traversy Media, and
Oh, okay.
he had a lot of Android tutorials. So I was learning Java for the first time, and it
That's
wasn't much,
cool.
but I literally moved the green ball from like the right to left and then left back to right with my hands after like you programmed it. And I was like, oh my god, this is so cool, I want to totally do this. And
Oh, that's cool. So like you would like be able to like move it with your finger
yeah, because
and
that's how
like,
I programmed it. Yeah, so it would wait for the touch, and then you could just move it from left to right, right to left. It was so cool.
oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and then I mean, you know how Korean culture work is, and I was working 8 to 12 hours a day, and then I'll get calls in the middle of the night. So I would only
Yeah.
have 1 or 2 hours of coding per day to actually, if I had the energy to do it.
That's what I'm
And
thinking. Like, how did you how did
yeah,
you even
so
like have the
so
energy to do that?
it came to a point where I was like, man, why I'm so much happier the 1 hour a day of coding versus having to spend 10 hours at work. This mathematically just
Man,
doesn't make sense for me to want to do this or like keep doing this, because if I want to make this hobby into a career, and I obviously, like there's that saying like do what you love or whatever, but in at that moment in time I really really loved coding, and I just felt like I was not spending an ample amount of time on it, especially because what you sleep for 8 hours, you work for 8 to 10 hours, like you're not gonna
yeah,
have that. It just mathematically doesn't make sense. So that's why I kind of took the leap of faith and did a coding bootcamp school, and
that's
then
awesome, man.
that ball started rolling. And now, I mean, I love coding, but I'm starting to really enjoy doing the YouTube content stuff. And actually, generally, it's like my girlfriend is on more of the creative side, where she does the singing, the acting, and all of that stuff. But
Oh,
I've
that's
been
cool.
slowly embracing that kind of persona or personality on YouTube. I don't know if you saw any of my older YouTube videos, but they're very rigid, and it was like more like tutorial focused, because like that's kind of where my element was. But
Yeah,
uh,
coming from the YouTube tutorials that you were watching
yeah,
before,
exactly.
that makes
Yeah.
sense.
And then I started doing a little bit more like face style videos, and those were horrible, like poor quality. I was reading from a script like right above the camera just to be like, "Hey guys, I am Tech Rally.
Hey,
Nice to meet." Yeah,
hey,
just
you gotta get it out somehow. Like,
yeah.
That's one of the things that I'm like super scared of, like starting a YouTube channel. I'm just like, what am I even gonna say? Like I already know, like I'm not like I can have a conversation with someone, but
Right.
if I'm just talking, like
Mhm.
what am I gonna say?
I would say that you'll be surprised of how much you can say. Like I think the reason why I actually started this series was I wanted to share people's stories that felt like they didn't think it was worth sharing. So originally, or
Huh?
I do have a nice blend of YouTube coders as well as just normal software engineers. And I feel like even
Yeah.
they have a unique story. And I've interviewed a few of my coding bootcamp classmates where they started in advertising or they started in marketing or they were teachers and now they're software engineers and this is their story and
Those
they're
stories
killing
are
it in the
so
game.
cool.
Yeah. So I remember we did the Twitter space together and there's just so many different types of backgrounds and how they started off and everyone has their own industry that they're in. So with tech, you could really do so much and I think that's awesome.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
That's really
But
cool.
yeah, I know and I really hope that like I don't know. I just want to share, like, that's ultimately the goal with at least this series is to kind of share everyone's story, even if you feel like it's not worth sharing. Because once you get the conversation going, people are just like, oh, yeah, I did this or I did that. And like, I was struggling with this. And it's like, dude, that's so awesome. And hopefully, if someone's in a similar situation and they're like contemplating whether or not they want to code or not, they could actually be like, okay,
Yeah.
Chris said this, so I'm going to do it now.
But yeah, like that's how I like initially felt like I could like it wasn't even an option,
Mm,
like
yeah.
is hearing other people's stories like that. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's
So
awesome,
who's
man.
your favorite YouTuber? Just kidding.
Y'all stay asking me that question. Chris Lyon, coding
No,
phase, y'all.
no, I'm good. I'm good. I know I'm pretty low on the totem pole. I'll accept it.
Bro, I watch you all the time though.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. But yeah, so I usually end with a closing theme or question, but maybe instead, I could kind of leave it open ended and we could talk about it too. It's like, what kind of advice would you give someone that decides to start anything, whether it's acting, coding, learning a language, anything that just requires some type of commitment?
I'm actually more interested in your answer. Uh, but okay, like for me, I think like I've always like anytime I wanted. Okay, well, anytime I'm thinking about learning anything new, like the reason could be like for money or like because we all got bills, or like for just a hobby or whatever. Like I usually just start with like, okay, why would I be interested in this? Like what like what are some cool things that people are making with this?
Mm,
Like when I was learning Blender, like everybody was saying, okay, if you want to make things that are procedural and you can change them a lot, depending on like what your client wants and stuff, Houdini is like the best thing to learn. That program, like everything's procedural, you can learn anything, you can do anything. Like so, I was like, okay, well, I guess I got to learn Houdini. And if I didn't spend the time to like look at all the cool things that people were making with Houdini, I would have never continued learning. I like just knowing myself, I would have given up after it would have been like 2 hours. Like I would have just been like, yeah,
right.
I don't know. It just end up on the list of like all the other things that I want to do. So
Mm, yeah. I'm pretty much on the same boat with you on that one, the knowing the why. At least from my coding perspective, I wanted to learn how to code because I wanted to make most of my time coding. You know how I just described where I spent 8 to 10 hours working at my last job, but I only spent 1 hour coding. And I was like, man, I actually enjoy doing this. Why am I only spending 1 hour? So how do I put myself in a position to make it 8 hours?
yeah,
And I wanted to put myself in that position. So I said, okay, if I learn how to code, then I could be a software engineer. And if I'm a software engineer, then I kind of accomplished the goal that I'm trying to set out to do. And I think that's what kept me going. And also, I don't know, the situation's a little different between my software developer career and YouTube career. But with my software developer career, I didn't really have too much to fall back on in a sense of like, if I didn't do this, I
Mm.
really don't know what I would have been doing.
Yeah.
So, because
Right. Yeah.
yeah, because I mean, like, I tried doing the lawyer thing, and I tried doing some other, like, maybe even I have no idea what I would have done if coding didn't work out, but I'm glad it did. And actually, a few of I met this other actor too, and he was saying like I wasn't good at anything else, so I became an actor. And like this was I was like, oh, cool, you had nothing else to fall back on. He's like, no, this was it. I was like, oh, that's so interesting. So in some ways, maybe that's kind of the what needs to happen for you to succeed. But at least with the YouTube one, I think ultimately I've seen so many people start a YouTube channel, but so many people
Mm.
quit because what, like, they're not getting enough subscribers, they're not getting enough views, they're not getting enough it's not worth the time that you spend because you're not getting monetized. All of those
Yeah.
reasons are valid, but at the same time, you kind of have to ask yourself, why did you start this channel, or why did you start on this project that you this whatever you wanted to do? And for me, at least with the YouTube, it's to ultimately help people break into tech as software developers with my tips and tricks and my advice. And that's what generally keeps me going and keeps me consistent. And
That's
hopefully,
awesome.
someone's finding value. And I've gotten some good messages from like a few people here and there that say like, hey, great video, and really appreciate the advice. And uh they they say I feel they say they feel like I'm pretty genuine. So good thing
Yeah.
I'm an actor as well. No, but no, I ultimately, that's kind of why what keeps me going with this YouTube channel. And it's
Mm.
really hard, not gonna lie, like making 2 videos per week, but with a
I can
full-time
only
job.
imagine. Yeah, like you also have a job that you're doing. Like
Yeah, I mean, and like also I want to have like a social life as well. So just trying
right.
to make sure I don't burn out, and make I relax when I have to. But
That's good. Yeah.
ultimately, it's kind of understanding why you want to do it. And yeah, that's kind of my little motivational speech, I guess.
No, that's so true, man.
Yeah.
Like I think like it's always so surprising all of the different whys that exist. Like
Mhm.
I just always thought programming was like, and we talked about this in like the Twitter spaces, but like I always thought programming was just like making apps for Google or like
Mhm.
Android apps or like iPhone apps, and like that was it. Like I just thought that was all of coding. Until later, like and I'm just saying this because like this is just the background that I came from. Like once I saw how it was being used in entertainment, I was just like, wait, so programmers work in like movies? Like how does I was just like, what? How does that? How was I never told this
Yeah.
before?
Yeah.
So like visual effects studios like
Yeah.
constantly hiring people to code for them. Like in all of these programs that we love using, Photoshop, Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, like all of
Yeah.
these programs, they have scripting, and like people who work at studios, they have a much higher chance of being hired if they know some of these programming skills. And like those are just like in the entertainment industry, but like literally any industry, you can work as a programmer. Like that's wild to me.
Right.
That is wild.
Right. And I mean, even in the finance industry, they hire a lot of programmers. But even if you're not considered a programmer, some people are programming without realizing, with like using the Excel, like those like
Yeah.
scripts and whatever. That thing seems like magic to me sometimes. I don't know how they.
True.
Yeah, but I mean, before I close out, I mean, I do I want to do this? Yeah, do you have any no
Yeah.
pressure to do this, but do you have any questions from your end to for me? Because I feel like I've just been asking you a bunch of
Bro.
questions, and
Bro. Yes.
let's uh let's get it on.
Okay. So like I was actually going to ask you about like YouTube. So like with YouTube, you mentioned that like the reason why you started is to kind of like get people feel like they allow people to feel like they can get into tech.
Mm,
Like why though? Like I mean, I that's a great thing
mhm.
to have, like a great goal to have. But like, is there something that's like making you feel like what gets you up in the morning every day to do it? Like, because it's not just
Right.
like, oh, like I want to make 1 or 2 videos. Like, you're doing
Yeah.
this constantly.
Yeah. And well, number one, as someone that kind of broke into tech in a non-traditional way, I know how hard it was to break into tech. Like I did the coding boot
Uh,
camp school, I did the 3 months of I moved to New York from Texas, and at that time I experienced snow for like the first time for a long period of time.
you
Like
said
three
snow?
no, yeah, so, yeah, it was, like, so miserable in New York, and I was going through, like, somewhat of the gauntlet to my coding journey. It just felt like I really started from the bottom of being so miserable and learning code and, like, working my way up to, um, being happy. Ultimately, I am pretty happy with where I'm at,
That's
and
awesome, man.
it's really hard to describe this feeling of just being a relatively decent software developer, and at the same time I just know how hard it was when I was at that low of trying to break in.
Yeah,
And that's kind of what I ultimately want to do for like other people, because I know how hard it is, and if I could give you like that one or two piece of advice that can improve your mentality when going to that interview, or making you feel like you deserve to get that interview or you deserve that position, um getting that feedback from people, I think I just really enjoy helping people, as kind of cliche as that sounds. And the first
yeah.
person I ever like mentored, and this was like free mentorship, we were talking almost once or twice a week, and ultimately she found a job in a month. But at that time she was like stressing out, didn't
What?
feel like she needed, or she found the job a month after the coding boot camp, but she was stressing out saying that
Oh, that's
I don't
awesome.
feel like I'm ready. And she even said that a company offered her a community manager position in the tech field, but it wasn't a software developer position. And I was telling
Oh,
her, hey, I don't think this is a good idea. You need to, because if you do take that position, you might end up not coding, and then you might forget everything you learned, and then you're ultimately back to square one. So giving pieces of advice like that, where it's, to me it's like simple, but at the same time, if I could change someone's life and kind of see that, it's so cool to me. And that's kind of
that is super
why,
impactful.
yeah, it's really impactful. And maybe it's my own like feeling good about myself or doing that, I don't know what it is, but ultimately that's kind of what I do enjoy. And um I want to figure out like long term wise, like how to scale this, because obviously I can't do like a one on one with everybody. So that's like the million
Right.
dollar question that I'm trying to figure out. But I think at least for a start, the YouTube videos is kind of what I that's what kind of pushes me to like
Hmm.
even give good advice about what do you want, what kind of questions should you ask if you're considering a coding bootcamp school, or like when you approach an interview. Like I generally like to recommend to anyone that I'm coaching, like, hey, don't come in with this mentality of like, hey, I'm only a self-taught developer, I only learned this. Like, don't say like only, or don't say I don't know too much, but I can prove. Just come in with the mentality of
Yeah.
this is what I can do, and I'm very willing to learn on things I don't know how to do. Right. So that
Right.
you gotta navigate the story to make the company want you, not shoot yourself in the foot and then go to the interview saying,
Yeah.
hey, my
I don't know how to do anything, but
yeah,
hire me.
but will you take a chance on me, and then I'll prove to you that so
Yeah.
it's a long-winded answer, but ultimately that's getting that feedback. It's I don't know how to describe it, but it's really
Bro, that's
rewarding. Yeah.
awesome. And like talking like how you were talking about how you came from like struggling like with feeling happy. Like
Yeah.
that's something that like I struggled with too. Like especially, and I know this like sounds cliche and like it might even sound shallow, but like not having money sucks.
Yeah.
Like it
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I remember like for a time when I was actually over in Korea, like I didn't have a place to stay because I just wasn't like, especially like when I first got there, I just didn't have. I saved up a little before I went, but like I didn't save up for like a year after I was gonna be there. So
Mhm.
after a while, I was just like I didn't have a place to stay, and I was like I ended up staying in the basement for a while, and like because someone luckily let me stay in their basement for free, and like buddy is super
Yeah.
great guy, but like it was cold and there was like no heat and like it was just terrible. But like having no money sucks and it's hard to be happy when you don't have financial freedoms. Like I don't know if like being rich I don't think being rich makes you happy, but not having to worry about like, bro, I can't afford anything outside of like rice and tuna, like
Yeah.
every day for like months. Like that's not, and then you can't get anywhere with like public transportation because you know you don't really have like a steady source of income enough.
Right.
So like that's not that's not fun.
It's not.
Um, yeah. So like, do you feel like engineering, like I know you were working at Samsung before, but like that period of time in between jobs and like trying to figure out like, is this even going to work out for me financially? Was that not stressful? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was, and I luckily I saved enough from working at 3 years at Samsung to feel comfortable in a sense that I could survive for like maybe a year. So
That's good. At
yeah,
least you had somewhat of a plan.
I had somewhat
Better
of a
than
plan. But even then, I mean, you're like when you're so used to getting a steady income, that's a very comfortable feeling to be in.
yeah.
And then I spent 12 grand on a coding bootcamp school, like upfront, just 12 grand, boom. And then that already took like a third of my like savings. And then I was just like, crap, like living in the most expensive city in the United States was not as probably a smart idea either. Um, and then like I actually got duped when I first moved, and I ended up living with in like a 5 bedroom apartment. Every room had two
Oh
people
man.
living in it, and I was paying like $1,000. It was just crazy. I didn't
Whoa.
know what I was doing, and like a lot of my classmates told me I was getting ripped off and whatever. So yeah, I mean, when I talk about my struggles, it was a struggle because I didn't know, like, New York was so foreign to me, and I've been to Korea many years, and it's just so different in that regard.
Yeah.
And it was so funny. I laughed when you were saying the public transportation thing because there were so many times where, yeah, there were just moments where I was like, I could walk in the snow. It's not too
Right.
bad in my Converse. And then, yeah,
5 miles? That
like,
sounds
no
doable.
problem, no problem. So, what was the question again? Like the fear of
Yeah,
that.
so like was
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
was that not
So
scary? The financial
it
like
was,
I
but in some ways, I feel like those are the best opportunities to succeed. I
yeah.
don't when you got nothing else to, like, fall back on, that's the best, and that's kinda I actually made a video that says, like, "Why I code like I'm broke."
Oh yeah, I remember you say that a lot.
Yeah, because basically when you like, there's no better motivation than not having anything. So, like,
Oh yes.
in some ways, that fire is really hard to replicate
Mm.
to when you
Yeah.
don't have anything else, but when you're like, money is great, but it also can make you very comfortable, like, and content in your
Right, yeah.
situation. So that's why I try to switch that gear of like, hey, if you get fired or whatever, there's no you have to work like you're broke because you just never know that scenario where someone you might get fired or you might lose a
Bro.
job or you laid off. Who knows, right? So
Right,
always trying
yeah.
to improve yourself is super important to me, and that's kind of something that kind of maybe even with this YouTube channel, what keeps me going is like I have to code. Like, imagine if I didn't have a job and YouTube was my only thing. Like, how hard would I be working right now? So I create these like false, I guess, false narratives or just some kind of narrative to push me to work harder, and that's been
Yeah.
usually pretty helpful.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. But woo, yeah, this has been an hour, but oh my gosh, I feel like I could talk to you for like another 30, 40 minutes, but just to save our listeners from a 2 hour
Bro, they click on the
conversation.
video, they're like 5 hours.
But hey, Chris, if anyone wants to have contact you or whatnot, I know you do have a Twitter and you have those
Yeah.
Twitter spaces. So I think if you want to give like shout out that plug, how often do you do those Twitter spaces?
Yeah. So I've done one
Nice.
so far. But I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Chris Lyon M. Like M. My last name is actually McDonald.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Chris Lyon M is my Twitter handle. If I love just talking about tech. I love hearing people's stories, learning from other people, sharing my own stories. So like if anyone just wants to like talk about anything related to tech, feel free to jump up on a Twitter space one day and we can learn from each other.
Do you still use Clubhouse or not as much?
I do. I mean, okay. I listen
You
more
listen?
on Clubhouse,
Yeah.
but I still have it. I
I feel like
usually am just like on Instagram and Twitter.
yeah,
That's
I
pretty
feel
much.
like more software developers are on Twitter Space anyways. It seems like that's kind of their niche.
Yeah, I think just with the Twitter community that already exists there.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, like you could just follow right away.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyways, this was super fun, Chris. I mean, I really appreciate your time. I'm so glad we talked,
Bro, it's
and
been like
man, you
super
got to share
fun.
your story. I feel like I learned a lot that I couldn't research at all for. So this was really good.
Bro, same here. Same here, man.
Yeah, man. And for everyone else, hope you enjoyed the show, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.